And we're back with my first guest, Sarah Finkelstein, who is with Signature Advisory Group. Thanks for being with me, Sarah.
Thank you so much, Barry. Thank you for having me.
Glad to have you. How important is long-term care planning?
Well, Barry, that's a really good question, but I think in order to answer that appropriately, we need to talk some numbers. So what I'd like to share with you is that we are all living longer these days, and that's a good thing. However, with that, we have challenges. We know statistically that males that are 65 years old have a 50% chance of living past 85 and a 25% chance of living past 92. Now that's long years, but for females it's even higher. And longevity planning is what we do. Longevity planning encompasses retirement planning, but with living longer there are challenges, and the challenges are how to not outlive your money, how to not deplete your whole retirement plan to pay for long-term care, and also how to sustain the same lifestyle in retirement as you had during your working years.
So do you recommend purchasing a long-term care policy?
Well, what I do is I recommend that clients protect their nest egg. People work 40, 45 years before they retire, and it's important that they protect their nest egg so that they don't deplete everything to pay for their long-term care. Now, statistically, we know that the odds of having a fire in one's home is 1 out of 1,200. And the odds of getting into a car accident is 1 out of 256. We protect those risks with homeowners insurance, with auto insurance, but the risks for needing long-term care are much, much higher. Statistically, 70% of people over the age of 65 will, at some point in their life, need long-term care.
I don't doubt it.
And people will say, well, long-term care, it's expensive. And yes, it is. However, the long-term care insurance is not expensive. I'll give you, for instance, I had my mom moved her down from New York. She was 6 years in assisted living, 2 years in a nursing home, total of 8 years in long-term care, which statistically is much higher than the average. The average is 3 years. But you know what happens with averages, Barry, right? Doesn't necessarily apply to everyone.
Right.
So what we do is we like to protect those numbers and help people to protect their nest egg. And there are different ways of doing so. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a traditional long-term care insurance plan. Nowadays, there's other ways of planning for that eventuality.
How expensive is it?
Well, that's a good question. Years ago, what we would do is we would recommend that people purchase at least $100 a day in coverage. Nowadays, we say at least $200 a day, roughly $6,000 a month. But people will say, well, what's the magical age that I should purchase? Because it's all predicated on age. The older we are when we purchase, the more expensive it is. The younger we are, the less expensive it is. So, for instance, when I purchased my policy, I was 40 years old. And because I was that young, I was able to get all the bells and whistles on my policy for very low premiums. So, for instance, I am paying $1,600 a year for my policy with lifetime benefits. So God forbid something happens to me, the policy will pay for the rest of my life.
That's a good deal. What happens if individuals choose to do nothing?
Well, you know, I say every decision has consequences.
That's right.
And when we don't make a decision, that's making a decision too. So we're deciding to kind of just let it go and not deal with it. What happens in that case is we end up with a crisis. And a crisis is much more difficult to deal with than if we plan in advance. So I always encourage people, have a plan, preferably on paper.
How can people reach you? Why don't you give out your contact information, name, email, phone number, website, etc.
I'm Sarah Finkelstein with Signature Advisory Group. The phone number is 561-503-4803, or by email, Sarah, S-A-R-A, at signatureadvisorygroup.com, and we're located in downtown Delray Beach.
Thanks for being with me, Sarah. I wish you a lot of luck. It was very informative.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Barry.
And we'll be right back.